I didn't expect it to go like this. We were supposed to be celebrating, but all I could feel was the cold weight of my Miles' eyes on me. I sat at the table, pretending to focus on the conversation, but her glare was impossible to ignore. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. And it wasn't just because I was 8 months pregnant. It was the way she looked at me, like I was failing her family. It had been that way for months. Ever since I'd found out I was having another girl, my Mel's disappointment had been palpable. She'd never hidden her desire for a grandson, but I thought after the first pregnancy, I could at least get some peace. I was wrong. I just don't understand why you couldn't try for a boy, she'd said casually a few weeks ago, her voice dripping with the kind of criticism she tried to disguise as concern. It's all well and good that you're happy, but think of the family name. I had kept quiet, trying not to let her get to me. But tonight, sitting at the dinner table with my husband, my heart racing, I could already feel the storm building. The conversation shifted, but not enough to release the pressure. I tried to keep my mind off the ever-growing tension, but then my Miles' voice cut through everything. So, when are you going to give us the son we've been waiting for? She asked, her eyes locking onto mine. Are you sure you're even capable of making one? You know, it's about time someone in this family did their duty. I froze, the words hanging in the air like smoke, suffocating any chance of normalcy. My husband shifted uncomfortably next to me, sensing the change in the atmosphere. Mom, can we not do this tonight? He said, his voice strained. But I could already see the hurt in his eyes, the way he tried to shield me from her venom, but was powerless to stop it. But it was too late. Her words were like daggers, cutting deeper than she probably realized. I just can't help but wonder what kind of legacy you're leaving, Maya, a second daughter. Honestly, how does that feel? To know that your husband's family is watching you fail. The air felt thick, and I couldn't breathe. I felt my face flush as the anger rose in me. I wanted to scream at her, tell her everything I was feeling. But I couldn't. She was still my husband's mother, no matter how cruel she could be. I'm not failing anyone, I said, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. You don't get to define my worth by the gender of my child. My Mills' eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, my husband spoke again, his voice louder now. Enough, Mom. We're having another girl, and that's that. But it wasn't enough. My Miles' face twisted in frustration, and the tension snapped. She looked at me, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Fine. But don't come crying to me when things get harder for you. The family's legacy isn't something you can ignore forever. The rest of the evening passed in a blur, my nerves frayed, my stomach tight with a mix of anger and exhaustion. I tried to keep it together, but the weight of her words kept pressing down on me, making it harder to breathe. Later, as we walked to the car, I felt my husband's hand find mine. He didn't say anything, but I could feel the unspoken apology in the squeeze of his fingers. He was sorry for her, sorry for what she'd said, sorry for what I had to endure. But I wasn't sure I could forgive her this time. I wasn't sure I could keep pretending everything was okay when my own mother-in-law treated me like I was less than because of the sex of my child. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That things with my mill were only going to get worse from here. The silence between my husband and me that night felt different. It wasn't the comfortable quiet that had once existed in our relationship, the kind that allowed us to relax and just be together. This was something heavier, something suffocating. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I could hear the hum of the house, the soft whir of the fan, but none of it made me feel better. I tried to ignore the thoughts running through my head, tried to focus on the baby, the little girl I was carrying, but all I could think about was my mother-in-law. It had been 2 weeks since the dinner, and the tension hadn't gone away. If anything, it had only gotten worse. I could feel her disapproval in every text she sent, in every comment she made when she called. "How's the baby? Are you sure she's doing all right?" It's hard for a woman to have 2 girls in a row. I hadn't responded to most of them, knowing that anything I said would just feed her fire. My husband, too, seemed increasingly distant, distracted by work, by the fallout from his mother's behavior. It wasn't that he didn't care. I knew he did. But there was only so much he could do to protect me from her venom. "You can't let her get to you," he told me one evening as we sat down to dinner, his voice soft, but full of concern. I looked at him, his face so earnest, and I felt a pang of guilt. It's not just her, it's everything, the pressure, the expectations. It's like no matter what I do, it's never enough. I paused, biting my lip, trying to keep the tears at bay. "She's never going to be happy with me, is she?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I'm not going to let her control our lives. Not anymore. We're going to get through this. We just have to stick together." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But every time I tried to push the anxiety aside, it came back stronger, like a shadow that refused to leave. And with the second pregnancy, everything felt more real. A few days later, I found myself at my OB appointment, sitting in the sterile white room, waiting for the ultrasound. My hands trembled as I rubbed my belly, trying to calm myself. This baby, our second girl, was everything to me. But with each passing day, the fear that the baby wouldn't be enough, that the world would never accept her, gnawed at me. The technician smiled at me as she applied the cold gel to my stomach. "We're just going to take a quick look, okay?" I nodded, swallowing hard. The sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, strong and steady. A wave of relief washed over me. But then, just as I was about to let my guard down, the technician paused, her hand hovering over the screen. "Everything looks good," she said, her voice still calm, but there was something in her eyes. "But we're seeing something a bit unusual." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then gave me a reassuring smile. "It's nothing to worry about. It's just a small spot. Nothing that affects the baby. But I'm going to have the doctor take a look, just to be sure." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. But the unease wouldn't leave. What was happening to my body? Was it just the stress? Was I overreacting, or was there something wrong? I tried not to panic as the doctor entered, her eyes scanning the screen. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Everything looks normal," she said, her voice reassuring. "This is just a precautionary check. It's nothing to worry about. Your baby is fine. Are you sure? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She smiled softly. You're doing great. Keep an eye on your stress levels. That's all. When I left the appointment, I tried to feel relieved, but the sense of uncertainty remained, lingering like a shadow. And as I drove home, I couldn't help but think of what my mother-in-law had said, how this pregnancy, this second girl, would somehow never be good enough. That night, when I got into bed, my husband pulled me close, his arm around me. I'm sorry, he whispered, kissing the top of my head. I know things have been tough with my mom, but we're going to be okay. You and me, and our girls. I wanted to believe him, but the weight of his mother's words, her disdain, pressed down on me like a constant H. I don't know if I can keep doing this, I whispered back, my voice barely above a breath. I feel like I'm drowning. I won't let her drown you, he promised, his voice steady and strong. We're a team, Maya. You're not alone in this. I closed my eyes, feeling his warmth next to me, but still, the nagging fear persisted, clawing at my mind. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about our daughters, the legacy we were giving them, and whether I could ever escape the shadow of my Mill's cruelty. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing, my heart already pounding before I even looked at the screen. It was my husband. His voice was low, tight with tension when I answered. It's happening, he said, his words heavy. We're having another girl. I blinked, still half asleep. The reality of what he was saying slowly sinking in. I'd known we'd been trying for another baby, but the thought of it actually being true felt surreal. A second daughter. Our second little girl. Before I could respond, his tone changed, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. I know what this means, he continued, his words barely audible. We're going to have to deal with her again. Her. My mother-in-law. The woman who had made it clear the first time around that my daughter, our daughter, wasn't what she had wanted. I closed my eyes, trying to will the weight in my chest away. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were supposed to be excited, to be planning, but every thought I had about the future was clouded by the memories of my Mel's comments. The subtle, and not so subtle, jabs. The criticisms. The constant reminder that I wasn't enough. I sighed, sitting up in bed. We can't just ignore it this time, right? I asked, knowing full well he was already thinking the same thing. I know, he replied. She's going to make this a problem. She's going to ask questions. You know how she is. He paused for a moment. I don't want to do this again. The words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. We had been through this before. I thought, maybe, the second time around would be different, that things would settle. But it wasn't just about the gender anymore. It was about her. It was about what her presence meant in our lives. What it was doing to us. The following weeks were a blur. I tried my best to focus on the pregnancy, to enjoy the milestones I could, but the dark cloud of my Miles' judgment followed me everywhere. I could already see her disappointment, hear her voice, questioning why I couldn't just give her what she wanted. Another son, When we finally made the announcement, I braced myself. My husband was there, holding my hand tightly, as we sat around the dinner table with family. We're having another girl, I said, keeping my voice steady. I wasn't sure what I expected, but when my Mel's face fell, I felt a sickening pit in my stomach. The smile she had worn seconds earlier disappeared, and her gaze hardened. "I see," she said quietly, her voice thin. "Another girl, Em." The words didn't need to be said. I could feel them hanging in the air, heavy with the unsaid accusations. It wasn't enough. None of it would ever be enough. "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes narrowing, looking at me like I had somehow failed her. "Are you sure she's not, going to be another boy?" My husband's hand tightened around mine, but I could feel the weight of his mother's gaze still on me. It was always this way. Like I was some sort of failure for not being able to produce a son. "I'm sure," I said, forcing the words out, even though I wanted to scream, to defend myself. But I couldn't, not while she sat there, with that look on her face. I didn't have it in me. The dinner passed in a haze, and I tried not to look at her, but it was impossible. She was still there, judging. Silent, but judging. When we left, I felt my chest tighten with every step. I tried to push it away, tried to ignore the sick feeling twisting in my stomach. But it was always there, gnawing at me. As we got into the car, my husband glanced at me, his face strained. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know she's impossible." I forced a smile, but it felt empty. "It's not just her," I whispered. "It's all of it. The pressure, the disappointment. I'm going to talk to her," he said firmly. "I'll make it clear that this isn't acceptable. That it's not about her, it's about us." But I wasn't sure it would make a difference, Em. The damage had already been done. I already felt it. The weight of her words, her expectations. That night, after we went to bed, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Trapped in this never-ending cycle of disappointment. My Miles' cruel remarks. The way she made me feel like I was less than. A failure. Not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a woman. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept coming, swirling in my mind, until I finally fell into a fitful sleep, exhausted by the weight of it all. It was the kind of evening I had hoped to avoid. I hadn't heard from my mill in a few weeks, and I thought, maybe, just maybe, the silence meant she was coming to terms with our second daughter. But I was wrong. The phone rang late that evening, and my husband's name appeared on the screen. His voice, when he answered, was calm but tight. I could tell something was off. "We need to talk," he said, a quiet urgency in his tone. "About what?" I asked, feeling the tension already tightening in my chest. "It's my mom," he continued. "She wants to meet." I stiffened, the blood in my veins turning cold. "Meet? What for?" He exhaled slowly, clearly wrestling with how to say it. "She says she wants to apologize. But, Maya, it's not that simple. She wants to see us, but she insists on a paternity test first. She wants proof. She says she has to know for sure if the baby's really mine." The room felt like it was closing in on me, my heart racing as the words sank in. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the image of her, sitting there, demanding this test, like it was a condition for her acceptance. Like my child wasn't enough without her validation. "I don't want to deal with her right now," I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. "She's gone too far, and now she's demanding more." "I know," my husband replied softly, "but we need to do this for our peace. Let's just go, hear her out, and see what she says. We can't keep running from her forever. I wanted to protest, to scream at him to stand his ground, but I knew how stubborn his mother could be. She'd already managed to manipulate him for years, and now I was being dragged into it, too. I felt the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on me, the constant undercurrent of her judgment, her disgust at the idea of another girl in the family. We agreed to meet her the next evening, and I spent the rest of the night pacing, my mind racing with all the possible scenarios. I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Something bigger than a paternity test, something darker. But I had no choice. I had to face it, for my husband, for my daughters. The next night, we arrived at her house. My heart was already pounding as we stepped through the door. She was sitting there, in her usual chair, eyes focused on her hands. When she looked up, I saw the same cold expression she always wore when she was angry at me for one reason or another. "Sit," she commanded, her voice clipped. I noticed the emptiness behind her words, the hollow edge to her tone that made everything feel suffocating. We sat down, and there was a long silence before she spoke again. "I just want the truth," she said, her voice far too calm. "I want to know if she's really his." She looked at me as if daring me to contradict her. "I need proof." I felt my chest tighten as she looked at my belly, the baby inside me. "What do you think this is?" I finally said, the anger in me starting to boil over. "You think this is a game, a test you can control, I'm not some pawn you can move around, just because you want to validate your family's ridiculous obsession with sons." Her eyes flickered with something, maybe surprise, maybe a hint of guilt. But she quickly masked it with the same cold, calculating look she always had. "You've always been difficult, haven't you?" she sneered. "So quick to fight back. I'm not the enemy here, Maya, you are. You and your daughters. You're ruining the family, and you don't even see it." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "You don't get it. You never have. It's not about your family legacy. It's about your need to control everything, to make people fit into your little box. I'm done. I'm done letting you walk all over me, done letting you control my life, my children's lives." My husband stood, too, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're done here," he said, his voice firm. "You'll never see us again unless you change. We're not doing this anymore, Mom." As we turned to leave, I could feel the weight of her eyes on me. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. Not when I knew what she was capable of. We walked out of her house, the door slamming behind us like a final statement. My husband didn't say a word on the way home, but his silence spoke volumes. He was finally seeing the truth for what it was. His mother, the woman who had shaped so much of his life, was nothing but a poison in our family. And I wasn't going to let her infect it any longer. But as we got in the car, I knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. And I could feel, deep in my bones, that something much worse was coming. The night after the confrontation with my mill, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the words she'd said, her cold dismissal of everything I'd done, everything I was. How could she be so cruel? How could she look at her son, the man I loved, and still refuse to see what was right in front of her, the truth? Our family, our daughters, were real. They weren't something to be erased, for the sake of some twisted family tradition. The next few days passed in a blur of tense silences between my husband and me. He was trying to process what had happened, but I could see the guilt eating him up inside. He kept apologizing for his mother, for her behavior, but the more he did it, the more distant I became. I didn't want his apologies. I wanted him to stand up for me, for us. Then, everything changed. I had been sitting on the couch one afternoon, trying to get through some paperwork for the baby's arrival, when my husband walked in, looking like he had just seen a ghost. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. "Maya, you need to hear this," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Wait, what's going on?" I stood up, my heart pounding. "What happened?" "It's my mom," he began, his voice trembling. She's gone too far this time. She's threatening to take this further. She's talking to people who can help her destroy us." I froze. "What do you mean, destroy us? Is she going to the police?" The thought of my mill escalating things into something legal, something official, hit me like a slap in the face. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and disbelief etched in every line of his face. "I don't know yet, but she's talking about making a case against us, saying I'm not the father. She wants to push this. She wants to drag this into a legal battle and make us prove ourselves." His eyes met mine, filled with anger and fear. "She's already tried contacting people from her past. Lawyers, who knows who else. Is she insane?" I whispered, unable to comprehend what he was saying. "She's serious. And I don't know what to do. Maya. I can't keep letting her have this much control over our lives. We can't just ignore her." I nodded slowly, my anger swelling inside me. How dare she? After everything we had been through, she still thought she could control us. I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. The injustice, the constant feeling of being trapped in a web of her manipulation. I couldn't breathe. "I won't let her ruin this for us," I said firmly. "I won't let her take this away from us." But as much as I tried to feel strong, the fear that crept up my spine wouldn't go away. The realization that this could spiral further, that she could drag us into a war of lies and deceit, made my stomach turn. The next day, we had no choice but to face the music. I didn't want to, but we had to. My husband arranged a meeting with his mother's lawyer, someone she had already been speaking to about our situation. I went with him, feeling sick to my stomach the entire time. The last thing I wanted was to be in the same room with her, let alone discuss this with someone she had hired to fight against us. When we arrived, the lawyer was all smiles, too polished for my taste. He was a tall, thin man with sharp features, and his handshake felt cold, businesslike. "Please, take a seat," he said, gesturing to the table. His voice was smooth, practiced. "I'm glad you two could make it." My mother is out of control," my husband interrupted, his voice harsh. "She's threatening to do God knows what, and I'm done trying to protect her. I'm done with her ruining our family." The lawyer didn't flinch, his expression unchanged. "I understand this is a delicate situation," he said, tapping a pen against the table. "But let's be clear, your mother's intentions are to make sure the paternity of the child is clear. Given certain concerns she has about your family's history, she wants to avoid any future complications." "Future complications?" I said, my voice rising. What complications? There's no question about who the father is. The lawyer raised a hand to calm me, his eyes cold. I understand the frustration, but we need to address the reality of the situation. Your mother believes this issue is bigger than just family dynamics. She wants to make sure there are no surprises. Surprises? You want to drag my wife through the mud, just because my mother doesn't want to accept the truth. My husband's voice cracked, and for the first time in days, I saw the raw emotion in his face. This is it. This is the last straw. The tension in the room was unbearable. I could see the lawyer calculating, waiting for the right moment to press us. And then, he did. She's willing to settle, for a reasonable amount, if you agree to the paternity test. This is about avoiding future conflict, about protecting the family name. The words hung in the air, suffocating everything else. Protecting the family name, I repeated, my heart hammering in my chest. Are you kidding me? What about protecting us? What about protecting our children? I could feel the room closing in around me. My blood was boiling, my hands trembling with the weight of the injustice. This wasn't just about a paternity test, this was about my mill, trying to take away everything we had worked so hard for. I don't care about your family's name, I said, standing up from the table. I care about my family. I care about what's right, and I won't let her destroy us. My husband stood with me, and I could see the determination in his eyes. We're done here. You tell her we're not playing her game anymore. We're done. As we left the office, I felt a small spark of relief. We had taken a stand, but deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The day the package arrived, I knew something was off. My husband had been on edge ever since our confrontation with the lawyer, and now, the tension between us had taken on a new weight. It wasn't just about my Miles' threats anymore. It was about the dark history we were starting to uncover. A history I never could have imagined. I was sitting at the kitchen table when the doorbell rang. I didn't expect anything, and the sound startled me. I opened the door, and there, lying on the welcome mat, was a small, plain package. No return address. No identifying marks. Just a nondescript brown box. My heart raced as I bent down to pick it up, the feeling of dread crawling up my spine. It was light, too light for something that might contain any useful information. But something about it felt wrong, like it had been sent to disrupt our fragile peace. I brought the package inside, setting it down on the counter. My hands were shaking as I carefully cut through the tape, my breath caught in my throat. The silence in the room was suffocating. And I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to uncover something we weren't ready to face. Inside the box were 2 small hospital bracelets. The kind you get when you give birth. Both were faded, worn with age. And their names were barely legible, scratched out with something sharp. But I could still make out some of the details. Mary was written on one of them, Margaret on the other, and there, tucked inside, was a note, written in my Mill's handwriting. I unfolded the note, my heart thudding in my chest. As some family traditions are worth preserving. I felt the room tilt, like the ground was shifting beneath me. The blood drained from my face, as I looked at my husband, who had entered the kitchen quietly behind me. He was holding his phone, and I saw the panic in his eyes before he even spoke. Where did this come from? He asked, his voice shaking. I don't know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. But I think we need to know what these are. What they mean. He stepped closer, his face pale, as he looked at the hospital bracelets. These are from the twins, Maya. The twins my family never talked about. They were born, and then they just disappeared. The words hit me like a punch. The twins. The missing girls in his family history. But how did she know about them? Why would she send this to us? What was she trying to tell us? My husband's hand clenched into a fist as he stared at the bracelets. This is my family's legacy, Maya. I've always heard the stories, the whispers about daughters in our family, but I never thought it was true. I thought it was just gossip. Just things people said to explain why no one ever spoke about the women who came before me. His voice cracked as he continued. But this is real. These were real babies. And my family killed them. They killed their own daughters to protect some lie about their bloodline, about their legacy, about keeping the family pure. I couldn't breathe. I had no words. The horror of it all, the deep, sickening truth that had been hidden from him, and from me, was too much to process in one breath. You don't think she's the first, do you? He asked, his voice low and bitter. She's always known. She's part of this. She's part of the family that erased these girls. That destroyed them for the sake of preserving some twisted myth. I felt sick to my stomach as the pieces fell into place. My mill wasn't just cruel. She wasn't just manipulating us for control. She was protecting a secret, a dangerous secret. A secret that could tear apart everything we had built, everything we thought we knew about this family. I need to know more, I said, my voice trembling. I need to know the truth about what happened. I need to know who else was involved. My husband's face hardened as he looked at the package in my hands. We have to find out everything. We have to get the full story for our girls. For us? It was then that I realized the full weight of what we were up against. It wasn't just a fight for our peace, for our future. It was a fight for the truth, against a family that had been hiding it for generations. Against a legacy of lies, of violence, and of the destruction of the women who came before us. The baby kicked inside me, reminding me that everything I was fighting for was worth it. But as much as I wanted to protect my family, as much as I wanted to give my daughters a future free from this madness, I knew this was just the beginning. The truth was coming, and I had no idea how far it would push us, or how much further we'd have to go to uncover it all. But I was ready to fight. I had to be. For my girls. For me. For the women who never had a voice in this family's twisted legacy. I never thought it would come to this. After everything, after the lies, the secrets, I didn't think my mill would actually follow through. But she did. She had to. She always does. It started when the phone rang in the middle of the night, waking both of us from a restless sleep. My husband groggily reached for it, his face tight with worry even before he spoke. I could hear the panic in his voice as soon as he picked up. "It's my mom," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "She's here. She's outside." I blinked, confused. "What do you mean, she's outside?" "She's with two men. They're trying to break in." The words felt like a punch to the gut. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing. No, no way. Call 911, he said, his voice harsh. I'm going downstairs. You stay here. I didn't wait for him to finish. I grabbed my phone, dialing the emergency number with shaking hands. I could hear my husband's footsteps pounding down the stairs as I spoke to the dispatcher. My breath coming faster as I tried to explain the situation. They're trying to get in, I said, my voice tight. They've been threatening me, and now they're here. I didn't even have time to think before the doorbell rang sharp, insistent. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up with fear. The realization hit me hard. They were really here. They weren't just threatening anymore. They were taking action. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my back against the wall, my eyes on the door. I could hear muffled voices from outside, my Mel's shrill tone cutting through the silence. We're family, she was yelling. We just want to talk about the baby. We need to fix things. I barely heard the rest of what she said. All I could focus on was the panic flooding my veins. The thought of what they could do if they actually got in. They're breaking the door. I whispered into the phone, my breath quick and shallow. I could hear the crunch of the lock as something heavy slammed against it. I swallowed hard. Please hurry. Then the sound came. A crash, followed by the unmistakable sound of wood splintering. My Miles' voice was clear now, taunting. Mom, go away. The police are coming. The police can't stop family traditions, son. We've been handling daughters for over a century. I choked back the bile rising in my throat, the disgusting realization settling in. My Mill wasn't just trying to argue with me. She wasn't just angry. She was trying to destroy my child. Trying to make me lose everything I had worked for, everything I loved. For the sake of some twisted tradition. The next few minutes felt like hours. I could hear my husband downstairs, shouting, struggling to stop them. The sound of fists hitting flesh echoed through the house. My mind went blank, my thoughts swirling. Trying to piece together what was happening. My husband was fighting to keep them away from me, from our baby. And then, just as quickly as it had started, it stopped. A loud bang. The sound of footsteps running away. I waited, frozen in place, my heart in my throat. And then my husband's voice, faint but clear, shouting through the house, get upstairs. Get to the bedroom now. I didn't hesitate. I ran, my legs shaking beneath me, as I scrambled up the stairs. I slammed the door behind me, locking it, and just as I was about to collapse against it, I heard the crash. The door was breaking. They were coming. I could hear my husband's voice downstairs, yelling at them, pushing them back, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. I pressed my back against the door, clutching my phone, waiting for the 911 operator to pick up again. But before I could dial, the door burst open. She was there. My Mill. Standing in the doorway, her face twisted with rage, her hands outstretched. Claws ready to sink into me. You're not running from this cheater, she hissed, stepping forward. You won't escape. Not this time. I could hear my husband behind her, his voice frantic, but I couldn't focus on him. Not while she was coming for me. I couldn't let her reach me. I was about to turn, about to move, when she lunged forward, her hand aimed at my stomach. But before she could touch me, my husband was there. He shoved her back with all his strength, sending her stumbling into the hallway. Get back, he shouted, his voice raw with desperation. I barely had time to process what was happening before I heard the pounding of footsteps. The two men had appeared, charging into the room, trying to reach my husband. They grabbed him, tried to pull him away from his mother, but my husband fought back, throwing elbows and shouting. I knew then, with sickening clarity, that we were in real danger. My husband was fighting 3 people, trying to protect me, but it was too much. Too many. The doorbell rang again, but this time, I didn't hear my Mel's voice. Instead, I heard the sirens. They were here. The police arrived seconds later, but by then, it was too late to stop the damage. My meal and the 2 men were caught in the house. Struggling against the officers who quickly restrained them. The police looked at me, eyes wide, but I barely registered their presence. My mind was still reeling from what had just happened. They had tried to break in. They had tried to kill my baby. My husband's arms wrapped around me as he pulled me toward the stairs, away from the scene. I didn't resist. I couldn't. All I could feel was the weight of what had almost happened. The terror of what had nearly been taken from me. As the police led my Mill away in cuffs, I looked at my husband, his face pale, blood dripping from his knuckles, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. We were safe. For now. But I knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. We spent the next few weeks in a haze, the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones and doesn't let go. I thought, once the worst was over, things would start to feel better, that the constant weight of fear would finally lift. But it didn't. It only shifted, morphing into something else, something I couldn't quite define. The day we moved to the new house was one of the hardest, but also the most freeing. I thought I would feel relief when I stepped into the new place, when the door closed behind me, and I realized we were away from everything. Away from the nightmare of my Mill and everything she had tried to destroy. But there was a stillness in me, a fear that lingered, like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I watched my husband carefully, his eyes scanning the room as he unloaded boxes. His movements slow and deliberate. He was still processing everything, the betrayal, the violence. He hadn't said much since the night we'd been forced to leave our old home, but I could see it in his eyes. The grief, the anger, the guilt. He walked over to me, his face tight. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. It felt like a question I should have been able to answer easily, but I wasn't sure anymore. "I'm fine," I said, not meeting his gaze. I knew that wasn't true, but it felt like the right answer. It was easier to lie, to say that everything was okay when it wasn't. We spent the next few days settling in. The house was small but warm, cozy in a way that made me feel like it could be home. But every time I looked at the empty walls, the quiet corners, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't real. That nothing was real anymore. My entire world had been turned upside down by one person's cruelty, and even now, with my Mill behind bars, it felt like the echoes of her violence still lingered, clinging to everything. I started therapy not long after we moved in. It wasn't something I had planned to do, but I could see that it was something we both needed. The weight of what had happened, the terror, the years of manipulation, was too much to carry alone. It wasn't just about my Mill anymore. It was about the years of damage she had done, to me, to my husband, to our family. Sitting in that small, quiet office with the therapist felt different. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I wasn't prepared for how much it would hit me, how much it would force me to confront. The words came slowly at first, like pulling teeth. But once I started, they spilled out of me, and I couldn't stop them. "She's always been a part of our family's legacy," I said, my voice shaking. This belief that daughters are something to be erased. It's been there for generations. I didn't understand it at first, but now I can't ignore it. I can't pretend it doesn't exist. The therapist nodded gently, her eyes full of understanding. "That's a lot to carry, Em, and it's okay to feel that weight." I swallowed hard. I feel like I'm still trapped. Like I'm still carrying it, even now. I'm still scared. "We'll work through it," she assured me. "One step at a time. It's going to take time to heal." And it did. Slowly, piece by piece. I started to feel like I could breathe again. The nightmares lessened. The panic attacks didn't come as often. But the scars, those would never go away. And I realized, somewhere along the way, that I didn't want them to. They were part of my story now, part of my survival. A few months later, we were sitting at the kitchen table one evening, our older daughter running around the living room, her laughter filling the space. I looked at my husband, his tired eyes softened with something I hadn't seen in a long time: peace. "We did it," he said, his voice low. "We made it through." I nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of my lips. "We did." He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. I should have protected you better. I should have seen the truth sooner." "You're here now," I said softly, "that's all that matters. We're here. Together." He smiled then, a real smile. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like everything might just be okay. We watched our daughters together that night, their innocent joy a reminder that we had made it through the storm. We had survived, and in that small, quiet house, in the midst of everything that had been lost, I found something I didn't expect: hope. Hope for the future. Hope for healing, and hope for a life beyond the shadow of the past. The next few weeks were filled with more change, more adjustments, but I started to see it. I saw us, as a family, finally starting to heal. I saw my husband laughing again, something I hadn't heard in months. I saw our daughters growing, thriving, free from the toxic legacy of his family's hate. Then one day, I received a letter. It was from a woman named Margaret. A name that meant nothing to me until I read the words she had written. My grandmother was one of the girls who was adopted. "I've seen the news, and I need you to know that she lived a good life. She always wondered about her birth family, but she had no idea what really happened. I want you to know that I'm here for you, I want to make sure the truth is told." I sat there, holding the letter in my hands, tears welling up in my eyes. For the first time, I realized that the truth wasn't just about us. It wasn't just about our fight for our daughters. It was about something much bigger, It was about breaking the silence that had lasted for generations. And in that moment, I knew that we were doing something important. Something that mattered. We were changing the legacy, rewriting the story, and I would make sure our daughters, grew up knowing the truth, knowing they were loved, cherished, and free from the darkness that had tried to claim them. I turned to my husband, the love of my life, and I whispered, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time, I truly believed it.